Matheson on Inside Sources.
Well, if you're just joining us, in the last segment, we covered some of the unpleasant rhetoric, we'll call it, deployed just in the last 24 hours, both at the Republican National Convention in a host of speeches last night that amped up the anger, fear, and frustration factor, and from President Joe Biden during a campaign speech in Las Vegas yesterday. And I'm going to say it once more. Everyone agreed. Everyone agreed it was time to dial it down. Everyone was pleading with the nation to just take the temperature down, to just dial it back a bit. And neither side could do it for 4 days. Less than 96 hours. That's sad. We have to do better, and we have to expect better, and we have to be better. Now, there were some moments last night as in our coverage of the Republican National Convention. There were some moments that got beyond the anger and the blame and the grievance politics and populism. There were a few things that focused on the future. There were some unifying positive messages for the country from the Republicans' point of view. And there were some things that humanized former President Trump in some ways that I don't think had really been borne out before. So those were all interesting. So let's go through a few of those. Nikki Haley, who was a last-minute addition in the spirit of unity, by the way, was just added over the weekend. She had not been invited to the convention. She had not been given a place to speak at the convention. And suddenly she found herself speaking in a prime time slot last night. And she did her best to give an endorsement of her former rival, former President Trump, and to talk to those who had supported her or who had supported other candidates, not the current nominee. Take a listen to how she framed that. I think there's some interesting things in there.
To my fellow Republicans, we must not only be a unified party, we must also expand our party. We are so much better when we are bigger. We are stronger when we welcome people into our party who have...
That was the first part of Nikki Haley's speech. She also made clear during her speech that an endorsement of Donald Trump does not equate with agreement on everything. This is where it got interesting.
We should acknowledge that there are some Americans who don't agree with Donald Trump 100% of the time. I happen to know some of them, and I want to speak to them tonight. My message to them is simple. You don't have to agree with Trump 100% of the time to vote for him. Take it from me, I haven't always agreed with President Trump, but we agree more often than we disagree. I'm here tonight because we have a country to save, and a unified Republican Party is essential for saving her.
That's Nikki Haley last night. I thought that was an interesting way to frame all of that. She said, hey, I don't agree with the former president on a lot of things, and I don't have to. I think that's an important thing. And strategically, again, I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat, strategically, that was smart. Remember, as soon as she dropped out of the race, President Biden's campaign very wisely put a coalition together to go after those Nikki Haley supporters to see if they couldn't tug them towards the president's campaign. And so that was clearly a message to that group. As to where Nikki Haley is and where they want those Republicans to be. Now, in what I thought was one of the better speeches of the night, and I was actually texting with one of my sisters about the fact that I do tend to watch these things and I do tend to think about the speeches and how they could be different or better and what I would have done to frame it. That's just a sick habit and a hobby. But Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who, of course, worked for former President Trump, she did give one of the best speeches of the night. And the most important moment to me was not about what she said about the politics, but it was a personal moment that I thought was really interesting. Take a listen.
And when an MSNBC host, the author of several books on empowering women, said I was unfit to be a mother, and another MSNBC host said I was vile, not even human, our president pulled me aside, looked me in the eye, and said, Sarah, you're smart, you're beautiful, you're tough, and they attack you because you're good at your job. Never let them stop fighting.
That was Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and I thought that was a real personal moment, whereas she was under attack as the person who was the spokesperson for then President Trump. That as she was under a lot of those attacks, that then President Trump really gave her that pep talk and bucking up moment of, "Hey, you're smart, you're beautiful, you've got this, and they're going after you because you're good at your job. So don't let them win. Keep at it." So an interesting, kind of a humanizing moment, I thought. Someone else who went down that path, of course, Donald Trump's daughter-in-law, who's the co-chair of the Republican National Committee, Laura Trump. She gave the closing speech last night and also had spent a lot of time in kind of humanizing ways, really painting the former president as a grandfather, talking about the grandkids and some of those connections. And in a really fun moment, again, I don't care about your politics, it was a fun moment to see the daughter-in-law of a former president do an imitation of Donald Trump on the stage at the Republican National Convention.
When I was given an opportunity to join a television network as a commentator, it was the push and support of my father-in-law that gave me the confidence to take that job. Always the first one to call or text me after a TV hit and tell me, "Great job, keep going." Not bad, right?
And it was a phone. She had the hand gestures down and everything. And so it was kind of a fun, light moment there at the Republican National Convention last night as Laura Trump imitated her father-in-law and former President Donald Trump. But she did do a very nice job of, again, someone called it a sanding and polishing effort by both Laura Trump and then also Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Now, one of the other great speeches of the night was from Florida Senator Marco Rubio. Again, someone who had run against Donald Trump in 2016, someone who was considered to be a vice presidential candidate, ended up not being that. Of course, J.D. Vance was named that, and we'll hear from him tonight. Marco Rubio is one of those people who still captures, I think, the essence of America in a lot of ways. He has ability to string a sentence together and to connect with a crowd in ways that are really powerful and meaningful. In fact, I was looking back when he spoke in 2012 in Tampa, Florida, as a pretty new and pretty young senator from Florida. He took a moment before he even started his speech and talked about those people who were in Cuba at the moment, that they were so close to America, and yet they were so far away from being free. And that was the beginning. So as he closed out the night, Marco Rubio highlighted the principles that we really all should be thinking about in the end.
Now, we must stand up and we must fight. Fight not with violence or destruction, but with our voices and our votes. Fight not against each other, but for the hopes and dreams we share in common and make us one. It is time to put our country and our people first again. And if we do, we will not just make America great again. We will make America greater than it has ever been.
Now, that's 30 seconds of what could have been delivered at the Democratic National Convention, as well as the Republicans, that as long as we fight, not with words and not with violence, but with our voices and with our votes, when we fight not against each other, but for the cause of freedom and opportunity for every American, then, yeah, we can make the country not just great, but greater than it's ever been. That's the kind of rhetoric that we should be hearing. And while both sides said, we're going to shift our tone, very few have stuck with it. Even just 4 days later, I think Marco Rubio got it right as he concluded his speech at the convention last night. If we do want America to be greater than it has ever been, that's going to be something that all of us are going to have to do together. All right, we'll step aside for some bottom of the hour news. Don't go anywhere. More Inside Sources coming up next right here on KSL News Radio. We'll be right back.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. The building where a man shot and wounded former President Trump and killed another man in the crowd at his rally was part of the Secret Service planning for the event last Saturday. The Washington Post reports local law enforcement said it didn't have the manpower to put a car and an officer outside that building. The district attorney in Butler County, Pennsylvania, says the Secret Service was told before the event that local agencies didn't have the resources to assist in securing that building. A family was rescued after somebody got stuck in a slot canyon. KSL News Radio's Michael Commit has more.
This happened at the Zero Gravity Canyon in Emery County on late Monday night. Search and rescue responded to a man who had become wedged in that canyon, but they had to split up their teams in order to pull the rescue off. Despite the tricky maneuvering, both the man and 2 others were rescued from the canyon, and everyone avoided serious injury.
And the successful operation earned the search and rescue team high praise from the local sheriff's office. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average 237 points higher today, while the NASDAQ dropped now 465 points. And our KSL weather looks like it'll stay hot as far out as we can see right now. That's next. KSL News Time, 1:31.
A secure retirement just doesn't happen by accident. When that day comes, what's most important to you? Are you sure to have more money than month? What about unexpected medical costs? Do you want to leave something to the kids or the grandkids? I'm Jeff Jr. from Trajan Wealth, and I want you to know we specialize in these questions and can help make your retirement dream a reality with some of the highest guarantees in the business. Imagine getting up to a guaranteed 12% growth on your retirement income and up to a 30% bonus up front just for opening an account. If you have funds sitting idle in an old 401k or IRA, consider guaranteeing it to secure the peace of mind you deserve. Don't leave your financial security to chance. Take advantage of the highest guarantees I've seen in my career. Call Trajan today at 801-899-7600. That's 801-899-7600. Or visit us online at TrajanWealth.com.
Annuity guarantees are based on the claims-paying ability of the issuing insurance company.
Your neighbor Greg loves summers in Utah, but he hates to paint, so he called Rhino Shield.
We live in a beautiful 2-story home that was built in 1916. Really been prepped and painted very, very poorly.
Rhino Shield ceramic technology is formulated for our unique climate here in Utah and is Class 1 fire rated.
We really had a lot of detail work in the team at Rhino Shield. Spent really 4 days just on the prep work, and we were so excited to see that. And the cleanup was just impeccable.
Utah, get the 25-year guaranteed protection of Rhino Shield right now for 10% off the regular price.
We've gotten numerous compliments, and we've actually even had some of the longer-term residents of our community thank us for protecting the integrity of our home.
This offer is limited, so call now 435-246-4466. 435-246-4466 or rhinoshieldwest.com.
Go Rhino Shield.
How's your summer been going? Despite these hot temperatures that we're having, are you doing all the things you want to enjoy, or has something like arthritic joint pain been keeping you from doing those things and having the quality time you desire with your family? Everybody knows that bone-on-bone pain in your knees, hips, back, or shoulder can stop you from living your best life. Be thankful today that you live at a time when there are new ways to treat pain and new cellular therapies that can get you lasting relief. QC Kinetics is helping patients like you every day with advanced regenerative medicine, and these are treatments that can accelerate your own body's healing properties and revitalize your joints so that you can move again. If you've been living with chronic pain and you've been avoiding pain pills and surgery, you need to look up our friends, the local QC Kinetics medical professionals. They're now in Mill Creek, Provo, and Bountiful. Here's the number to call for a free consultation, 385-766-1987. Call QC Kinetics today, 385-766-1987.
Derek Overstreet, founder of the New Millennium Group. We're a financial planning firm. Listen, we're fiduciaries. We have advisors standing by right now to take your call. That's 888-999-6370. 888-999-6370. The reason you're going to want to call is we're going to help you retire 3 to 5 years before you thought possible. Now, imagine how that would be if you could actually retire 3 to 5 years sooner than your plan was. The way we do this is by putting together a step-by-step plan, taking into consideration any rental properties that you have, any pension income that you have, your Social Security. Listen, we put that all together for you in writing. It will allow us to build your income based on inflation. You know, inflation has been rapidly rising. You and I both need a plan that whatever we start out our income at, in 5 or 10 years, we're going to need 40% more income. So if you're one of those people listening and you'd like a plan in writing, give us a call at 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370 or go to utahsfinancialplanner.com.
We hope you have the right app on your phone for news. You probably have dozens.
But the KSL News Radio app, well, it makes our live stream super easy.
Plus, our talk shows are right there as podcast for your workday.
That's the app for KSL News Radio.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Sinclair's Dino Pay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Meese.
Well, fire crews are responding to a vehicle fire in downtown Salt Lake City at 200 East and 100 South. We're hearing over the scanners that the vehicle is engulfed in flames and it's blocking a turn lane of travel. GoPave Utah would like to do a shout out to all veterans, active duty reserve, and your loved ones. The GoPave Utah family and employees humbly thank you for your service and dedication. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
We'll have highs close to or over 100 degrees going into next week, and there's a chance for thunderstorms over the mountains that could spill into the valleys of the Wasatch Front. Right now, 93 degrees and sunny. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com for Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, from attempted assassinations to mob threats, public servants across the political spectrum are grappling with an unsettling reality, the ever-present risk of their personal safety. This goes from the highest office in the land in an attempted assassination over the weekend to people who are purely poll monitors or election officials, to people who sit on school boards and city councils. The alarming trend not only endangers individuals, but it threatens the very foundations of representative government, potentially influencing policy decisions and deterring very capable leaders from wanting to even get into public service. So we've got to think again about what we think we know when it comes to how do we safeguard that, both our elected officials and our democratic principles that define the nation. Really thrilled to have joining us back on the program. McKay Coppins, staff writer at The Atlantic, joins us on the line, has a great piece about how a lot of those political leaders are living in a kind of fear these days. I know you connected with our friend Jeff Flake, former senator from Arizona and current ambassador to Turkey, as he announced yesterday that he would be coming home in September. But McKay, welcome back to the show, and give us a sense of some of the things that you've been hearing, especially in light of the events over the weekend.
Yeah, it's good to be on. Thanks for having me, Boyd. After I saw the news of the shooting at President Trump's rally in Pennsylvania, the first person I thought of was actually Jeff Flake. And that's because I profiled him a number of years ago and actually was in his office the day after he was at a park in Alexandria, Virginia, where a gunman opened fire on a bunch of congressional Republicans who were playing baseball. And I remember being in his office that day after with him and his wife. And, he was kind of slumped back in his chair. It had obviously been a really kind of traumatic 24 hours. He himself was not shot, but he had applied a tourniquet to one congressional aide who was hit. He had applied pressure to the wound of Congressman Steve Scalise, who was also hit. And he was kind of reflecting back then on how the temperature of our politics is just too high, how the discourse in our politics has gotten too extreme. And I remember him kind of saying, I just don't know how much longer we can go on like this. I have to believe that at some point Americans will recoil and say, that's enough. And that was in 2017. And it's kind of depressing to think that, so many years later, we now have had, a series of additional acts of political violence targeting government officials. So we've now had an attempt on the life of a presidential candidate and former president. And when I got Jeff Flake on the phone, he was in Turkey and he had woken up to the news. And he just said his first thought was not again. And he, like me, I think, and like a lot of us, is just, we're all kind of dismayed that we haven't figured out how to turn the temperature back down in this country in the past 8 years.
Yeah, I think it's. We talked in the first two segments of the show today about we're not even 96 hours from the time the shots were fired on Saturday, and for all the calls of taking the temperature down and dialing it back from both sides of the political aisle, including the president from the Oval Office, no one made it 96 hours. The president was very fiery in his rhetoric, very angry. A lot of pejoratives thrown at the former president yesterday in a speech at the NAACP in Las Vegas. Of course, last night at the Republican convention, the unity things came off in a big way. There were still some great speeches in there that were positive and forward-moving, but they couldn't even make it 96 hours. So what does that tell us in terms of where we are, and what do you think it's going to take to get to that recoil moment that you mentioned?
I mean, I don't know. You hope that it doesn't require further acts of even more, severe political violence. But I'm here. I'm calling from Milwaukee, where I'm at the Republican National Convention, and it is kind of the same thing where you see. I had thought for sure that this would totally change the shape of the convention, right? And in some ways it hasn't, and I don't think we can render a final verdict on that until President Trump gives his speech. He has said that he rewrote the speech after the shooting, that he's going to call for national unity. Certainly I hope that's true, but it is still the case that I think, to your point, everybody's back at each other's throats, right? And even in the immediate aftermath of the shooting, you had kind of prominent pundits and people on social media blaming the one side or the other for their past incendiary rhetoric and their recriminations. And it just doesn't feel like there is a lot of appetite in this moment for the kind of comedy and national unity that everybody claims they want. I don't know what it'll take, but I do think it starts with acknowledging that, our country doesn't work. The American experiment doesn't work if our political leaders are living in fear of violence from their own constituents.
Yeah.
Right? That has to be a basic, fundamental thing that we all agree on, or else we're kind of lost.
Yeah, it's so true. And you pointed out in your piece at The Atlantic, you can read that at theatlantic.com today, everything from Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh having someone who had his own plan to take out the justice, to Mitt Romney and those who were threatened, former Vice President Pence. Of course, you had the tragic shooting of Gabby Gifford in Arizona. And as you look at all of those play out, it is interesting, and it does, I think, cause us to reflect a little bit that we have so many of these members of Congress that they don't have security, and I've witnessed so many of them just be totally reamed, waiting to get on an airplane or with their families at a restaurant, and that's the kind of stuff that I think we've really got to take a look at.
I think a lot of people don't realize this, that unless you are a president, member of the First Family, there are a handful of other leadership positions. You're not, followed around by Secret Service or security, right? These members of Congress, members of the Senate, they are by design supposed to be, available to their constituents. And it's actually quite easy to walk into a Senate office building, for example. You go through a metal detector, but you can walk right up to the offices and, drop off literature, try to even confront them in the hallways. And there's something, democratic about that, and I think it's great in some ways, but it also doesn't work if, the threat of violence is forever lingering over those encounters. And part of the reason I wanted to write this piece is that, a number of those people you mentioned are people I've profiled for The Atlantic in the last, 6 or 7 years. And it was kind of unnerving to realize how many people I've spent time with and written about have in the past several years become targets of political violence. And I just think that, to understand their psychology and to understand, that kind of anxiety and that fear and having to live with it is important for us as Americans, because we don't want to get into a situation where our political leaders are making governing decisions because they're afraid of violence from their constituents. That certainly is not how our democracy is designed.
No question about it. Real quick, before I let you go, McKay, since you are at the convention there, any surprises thus far or any standout moments that were maybe unexpected for you as you've watched this all play out?
Yeah, it's always interesting to be in the forum for these conventions because the way that people react inside the room is sometimes different from how people react watching at home. Inside the room, some of the standouts of people who have gotten really positive responses. Vivek Ramaswamy, his speech I think was a big hit. I think last night Nikki Haley and Marco Rubio both did, I think, pretty effective jobs of trying to make the case for President Trump to people who might be skeptical of him for various reasons. Yeah. And, especially in Nikki Haley's case, given how hard she campaigned against him, she went up there and I think, she's a talented politician. I think she made her case. I don't know how many people it will move, but I will say the mood at the convention in general seems pretty triumphant. I mean, the Republicans feel like they have this race pretty well in hand, and until something major changes, I think they're going to feel pretty confident headed toward November.
Great perspective as always, McKay Coppin, staff writer at The Atlantic. McKay, always appreciate you making time for us, and I think we should just replay the last 30 seconds of Marco Rubio's speech because you could play that at the Democratic National Convention, you could play it anywhere, and it would inspire our better angels, and always good to hear from Marco Rubio that way. McKay, thanks so much for getting through security and to a spot where you can talk to us today. Thanks so much.
Happy to do it. Thanks, Boyd.
All right, that's McKay Coppins from The Atlantic. And again, if we have political leaders who are in fear of their safety all the time, will they be making decisions out of fear or based on principle? Those are things we can't get to. We got to change the trajectory. And we'll continue that conversation when we come back. We'll be right back.
You trust us for news and information in your car. Now trust us at home. KSL News Radio has you covered, keeping you informed on the latest breaking news, weather, traffic, sports, and more. Listen on your Amazon Echo or Google Home device. Just say, Alexa, open KSL News Radio. Or listen on the KSL News Radio Listen app. Text the word app to 57500. KSL News Radio. We have you covered.
Have you ever done anything in your life and you've thought, wow, I wish I'd done that earlier? We all have, haven't we? When I lost this 34 pounds with Soda weight loss, I thought, what in the world? Why did I wait so long? I could have felt this great in my skin years ago if I had just gone to sodaweightloss.com, but I didn't understand. You don't know what you don't know. I didn't know that if I worked with a nutritionist, someone who's really smart about food, that I could still eat things that are delicious and not feel deprived. It really is about the education.
I feel like you're enrolling in like a school of nutrition with a whole new perspective on what food is and what it does for your body. That kind of makes the biggest difference, is it teaches people about food.
Why not go to sodaweightloss.com and just click on that button that says request a nutritionist callback. There's no obligation. If you do that, you can just talk to a nutritionist and find out, what would it be like for me? How much weight could I lose? And will I still get to eat the foods I love? It's sodaweightloss.com, SOTA weightloss.com. SOTA stands for state of the art.
What's up, everybody? I'm Mike Wilson with Any Hour Services, and if you have a drain that's clogged or backed up, after you've tried the plungers and products, the next step usually involves some kind of drain snake or cabling equipment. You see, sometimes the blockage is far enough down the line that you need special equipment that most homeowners just don't have. That's where the Drains Department at Any Hour Services can help. A drain snake can clear most blockages and get the water flowing again, and clearing blocked drains is what our Drains Department does day in and day out. So if you're a homeowner with a drain line that's clogged or backed up and you'd like one of our drain technicians to come and snake the line for you, it's only $29. Yep, you heard that right. Any Hour Services will snake any drain line with normal access for only $29. Sinks, showers, tubs, toilets, floor drains, laundry drains, even that sewer main line that connects to the city. We'll snake any line for just $29. For help with your drain issues, call Any Hour Services at 801-443-7700. You can Google Any Hour Services. You can even schedule online at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Home ownership.
At Progressive, we know it's part of the American dream. It's the land of the free and the home of student drivers ready to back into your new fence at any given time. It's firing up a round of burgers and dogs on your rusty grill with a faulty gas line that engulfs your tool shed in flames. It's also round-the-clock protection when you bundle your home and auto with Progressive, which can help keep the American dream of homeownership alive and kicking. Get a quote at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company, affiliates, and other insurers. Not available in all states.
Hey everyone, it's Ted from Consumer Cellular, the guy in the orange sweater, and this is your wake-up call. If you're paying too much for wireless service, you don't have to keep having that nightmare. Consumer Cellular has the same fast, reliable coverage as the leading carriers for up to half the cost. So why keep spending more than you have to? Seriously, wake up and call 1-888-FREEDOM or visit consumercellular.com.
Savings based on cost of Consumer Cellular single line 1, 5, and 10 gig data plans with unlimited talk and text compared to lowest cost single line postpaid unlimited talk, text, and data plans offered by T-Mobile and Verizon January 2024.
Common Spirit Health. Hospitals, clinics, and caregivers all connected to advance healthcare in Colorado, Kansas, and Utah. Healthcare with human kindness is here. Hello, human kindness.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomis. First, the Washington Post reporting today that local law enforcement in Butler, Pennsylvania told the Secret Service they didn't have enough manpower to watch the building where a man who tried to assassinate former President Trump got onto the roof. Second, a family was rescued from a slot canyon in eastern Utah on Monday. Third, a new study shows getting COVID while you're pregnant increases the risk of long COVID. 93 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
Of course, a lot of our coverage last week focused on the events surrounding the 75th anniversary of NATO, a very momentous occasion. Of course, as they convened here in the U.S., an important moment for those allies, and also an important time for some questions in terms of where is NATO, what is it doing, why is it doing it, and most importantly, what comes next. Fabulous piece written by Seth Cropsey, president of Yorktown Institute. He served as a naval officer and is Deputy Undersecretary of the U.S. Navy and is the author of Mayday and Sea Blindness and joins us on the line. And Seth, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Boyd.
So let's start with kind of where we are with NATO. Of course, it was an important opportunity to mark that 75th anniversary and also a really important time to kind of take stock of where we are and what comes next. Give us your assessment.
Well, I think it's a good thing to have accomplished 75 years of successful deterrence and to have grown the alliance. There are issues that face this alliance, as would face any alliance, any organization for the future. And the two most important ones, I think, really needed to be more closely examined than they got. They need more examination than they received in the 75th anniversary that took place last week. Specifically, what the structure of European security is going to look like following the Ukraine war, and what kind of changes are needed. And second, what capabilities are critical to deter Russia, and how does NATO go about providing those?
Yeah.
You know, all organizations can use assistance, and none are perfect. And these are areas where I think that the celebrations and pomp and circumstance of the anniversary might better have been focused on answering the question of what its structure is going to look like in the future.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. The photo ops are easy. It's the hard work and heavy lifting behind closed doors that you got to get down to the practical, tactical things. And so I want to unpack those just a little bit with you there in terms of what that should look like, especially in light of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. You mentioned a couple things in your piece, the importance of formalizing that 2% of GDP. Obviously, making those demands is an important piece of it. But kind of unpack that and some of the other things that should have been part of the conversation as we both look back and look ahead.
Sure. Well, the 2% goal is very useful. There's been progress toward it, which is a good thing, but there are some ways in which a large organization or even an alliance is like a family, and that is that there are two important economic questions that an alliance and a family face. One is income, and the other is how do you spend it?
Yeah.
So if the focus is overmuch on getting to the 2% level, the risk is that there will be insufficient attention to how it's spent. And how it's spent determines a great deal of its abilities to deter or, if necessary, to defeat Russia. And there simply needs to be more consideration given to that than the alliance did at the 75th anniversary or is giving as a matter of course.
Yeah. As we always say, families are messy, alliances are messy, and you have to have that conversation of not only what do we have, what's the income coming in, but then how are we going to prioritize it in terms of spending. You said one thing in your piece that really struck me, and that was that NATO's refusal to issue a clear roadmap as it relates to Ukraine is politically intelligible. Kind of break that down for us, because I do think there's a lot of folks who say, we understand dollars and cents, we understand weapons, but what in terms of both strategy and expectations, how does that conversation need to evolve?
Obvious point is that while Ukraine is at war with Russia, is not the right moment to bring Ukraine into NATO, because that would Ukraine would instantly invoke Article 5, and most of the countries in NATO are not prepared to make that commitment right now. They are prepared to make a commitment to Ukraine's security once there is a ceasefire, or at least they're more prepared once there's a ceasefire, because that will lessen the chances that Putin will do this again. And lacking an unconditional surrender by Russia, you can count on Putin trying this again if he thinks he can get away with it, which is to say waiting a few more years until the Russian military is better prepared than it is today, and then attacking again. And that's the point. The idea is to deter that, or if necessary, to defeat it.
Yeah, and I think that's the long-term vision, I think, is the key in terms of that deterrent. What is it that will prevent this from happening again down the line, regardless of how things play out in the short term as it relates to Ukraine. Finally, as you look at things moving forward, if there was one priority that we all should be watching for as it relates to NATO in the month and the year ahead, what are you watching for?
Giving Ukraine a green light to conduct effective attacks against Russian logistics wherever they're located, and thus cutting off the invading army from its supply lines.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important part, that ability to not just manage and maintain, or to just do that 6 inches or a foot at a time of clearing out mines and those kinds of things. That rarely leads to real advance or real retreat. So I think that's a crucial part of that longer-term strategy. Great piece to check out today. Again, Seth Cropsey is the president of Yorktown Institute, served as a naval officer and as a deputy undersecretary of the U.S. Navy, author of Mayday and Sea Blindness. Seth, thanks so much for joining us. Thank you for your service and for your perspective today.
Thank you, Boyd. Pleasure.
Great perspective there in terms of the NATO alliance and what needs to come next. I think that is the big test and the big question. It's not just about getting everyone to pay their fair share. It's having a strategy to deploy so that people like Vladimir Putin are deterred, that they recognize that the kinds of invasions that they've done in places like Ukraine are not going to be acceptable. And it won't just be with a little bit of support that allows Ukraine to maintain. They actually have to be able to win. Well, that wraps it up for hour number one of Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. We will step aside for some top-of-the-hour news, but don't go anywhere. We're going to have a think again moment as we start hour number two. We're going to talk about misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy theories, and how we all need to check the process of how we consume the news and what we choose to repost or to buy into. So stay with us. Much more Inside Sources coming up next.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, we're counting down 7 days until the historic announcement, Salt Lake City 2034.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. 2 people died after a fire at their home in Pleasant Grove overnight. Fire Chief Andrew Ingeman says initially they found a partially disabled man inside who had died at the scene. They rushed an elderly woman to the hospital, but she passed away. The state fire marshal's office now working to figure out just what started it.
Right now they're looking at possibly some kind of an electrical issue, whether it's a dryer or something that's wired back in that area.
And the 2 were a mother and son. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. The building where a would-be assassin fired shots at former President Trump was part of the advanced security planning for that event. But the Washington Post reports local law enforcement in Butler County, Pennsylvania, told the Secret Service they didn't have enough manpower to post an officer there. A Secret Service official told the Post putting an officer outside the building was considered one way to secure it. The local district attorney said they told the Secret Service they just didn't have enough people. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average rose 243 points to this point in the day, but the NASDAQ has been down all day, now down 512 points. And our KSL weather. Looks like 100-degree days are the norm going forward. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:01.
Hey, Utah. When it comes to guiding the growth of our state, you buzzed in with your comments, and we listened to what you had to say. Your feedback on the future of Utah's housing, water, transportation, and open space will continue to help our leaders make important policy decisions, preserving and improving our high quality of life in meaningful ways for years to come. So, thanks for speaking up. Learn more about our state's future at guidingourgrowth.utah.gov.
This Friday from 10 to 1, the movie show comes to Sound Sleep Medical. But first, take the time to learn about a better night's rest. Sound Sleep Medical delivers oral appliance therapy that treats sleep apnea without the use of CPAP machines. They're professionally fit, warranted, and covered by most major medical insurance. In the days of a poor night's sleep, Sound Sleep Medical will help. Call Sound Sleep Medical at 801-716-8672 for details. Sound Sleep Medical.
Attention! If you owe money to the IRS, this is an urgent message. The IRS is cracking down by sending out heart-stopping letters, aggressively garnishing paychecks, seizing bank accounts, and putting liens on homes and businesses. They call it enforced compliance, and you better watch out because penalties and interest on unpaid taxes compound daily, making it seem impossible to ever get out of debt. Don't let the tax debt destroy your life. You need to call Optima Tax Relief, the #1 tax resolution firm. They're experts in the Fresh Start Initiative, one of the biggest breaks that the IRS has ever offered. If you qualify, you could save thousands. Optima's resolved over $1 billion of tax debt for their clients. A+ rated with the Better Business Bureau, they'll fight to get you the best deal possible. Call Optima now for a free consultation.
Call 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460.
Optima Tax Relief.
Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
Hey, have you ever felt more like a beach ball than beach ready? I know how that feels because that was me up until this spring. But last fall, I finally made the choice to reach out to my friends at Soda Weight Loss, SOTA Weight Loss. State of the art, and boy, were they state of the art. I let go of 70 pounds in 5 months. Now I've been 5 months in maintenance, and I've kept it off, and I've kept my new body shape, I've kept my new confidence, and I want to share that with you. You'll have a nutritionist who's just a text away to help you stay on track, because Soda only employs nutritionists and dietitians who love helping people reach their goals and stay healthy for the rest of their life. Soda's the #1 weight loss company in America for client satisfaction and client results, and we have the proof at sodaweightloss.com. That's SOTA weightloss.com. Click the Request a Nutritionist callback button, and in minutes, you'll find out exactly why Soda Weight Loss is perfect for you to reach your goals. Soda has changed my life for the better, and it can change yours, because Soda is, say it with me, state of the art.
It's a priority for us at this station to bring you all sides of a story and to talk about the news fairly, completely.
Get all the facts and be really aware. Utah's Morning News with us, Tim and Amanda.
Weekday mornings 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Meese.
Had some unusual slowing southbound I-15 going from Bluffdale to the point of the mountain. Looks like that's starting to pick up and get back to good speeds again. We have an auto pedestrian accident in Midvale, 7200 south, just to the side of 400 west. Hey, Utah County, Jones Paint and Glass is opening a new location in Payson. Be sure to come to their grand opening celebration on July 27th from 8 to 5. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
We'll have highs close to or over 100 degrees going into next week. There's a chance for thunderstorms over the mountains that could spill into the valleys of the Wasatch Front. Right now, 97 degrees and sunny. I'm Dan Bomis from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
As we start hour number 2 of Inside Sources, of course, within the wake of the recent assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump just 4 days ago, the digital landscape has been inundated with a familiar flood of misinformation, disinformation, and conspiracy theories, which is a troubling pattern in our increasingly interconnected world. We can no longer just take things at face value, especially if you're getting your news from your social media feed. It does present an opportunity for us to think again about what we think we know in terms of headlines, clickbait, and what is coming at us 24/7, so that we can actually get past those headlines and get to the facts. Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
As we navigate this very complex information ecosystem that we all live in today, there are a lot of things that we can do together that can help us be more resilient, more informed in a very digitized democracy. So as we look at how we preserve and protect our constitutional republic, I just want to go back. Again, remember, it was only 4 days ago that this all began to unfold, and we see the all too familiar patterns. We talked in the first hour of the show about the calls for unity, the calls to tone it down, lower the temperature, dial it back, and how neither side of the political aisle was able to restrain themselves for even 72 hours. They proved incapable of that. That's a sad commentary. You can go back and listen to the first part of the show for some insight there. But I want to dig into what else happened immediately following, within minutes of the events unfolding before our very eyes. We watched it play out in real time, and then we watched it be replayed over and over in the moments and then the hours and then the days that followed. And it was fascinating to me that immediately, within minutes of the images of the former president being shot, going to his right ear, and then being taken down and covered by Secret Service, and then being taken off the stage and into the armored vehicle. And within just a few moments, there were already images and hashtags out there that this was all staged, coming from the political left. There were doctored images of the Secret Service members with big smiles on their faces. And obviously those weren't real. But it was all about this case that was being made that the Trump campaign had somehow orchestrated this as a way to get attention and positive feelings about the Trump campaign. Now, from the other side of the spectrum, there were also an equal number of misinformation, disinformation, and conspiracy theories coming out from those on the right saying that this was Joe Biden's doing, that the Secret Service was part of the cover-up and part of the whole plot, and you can go 27 levels into all of that. So the fact that within moments of an attempted assassination on a former president and nominee for the highest office in the land, that you could have both ends of the political spectrum already calling and putting out there conspiracy theories. Now, I do want to be very clear on one thing as we approach this topic, and that is that all of the theories in terms of the breakdown and what happened do need to be explored, but not on social media. The investigation needs to take place, the information needs to be sought, the facts need to come forward and then be presented. Here's what we know, here's where the failures occurred, here's how we make sure this doesn't happen again. And you play all of those things all the way out. Now, the test then becomes you and me. How do we consume the news? So what should we be watching for? There's been a number of really good pieces out there. I was actually struck today on News Nation. Roberto Braga, who is a writer and a good thinker when it comes to social media and media in general, in terms of how do we consume it and how do we make sure we're not letting those at the extremes and the misinformation, disinformation, and those who are looking for a conspiracy theory to peddle aren't driving the narratives and shaping and solidifying the beliefs and understanding of the American people. So as I said, within just a few moments, there were things saying this was a staged thing or that this was a conspiracy from the Biden campaign. All of those things should cause us to really step back and to start exploring how we're consuming all of this news. So here's a couple of things that we've picked up in some of our research that I think are really important for all of us to consider as we continue down this path. And if we continue down this path over the next several days and weeks as the investigation takes place into what happened and why. So I think we have to always be on the lookout and beware of any of the dark humor, any of the memes. Those are things we just have to watch. We also have to check our sources. And along with checking our sources, we also have to check our bias. There's no question that people who have high interest in politics, either side of the political spectrum, they consume and tend to consume pretty hyper-partisan news, which is often misleading information. Doesn't matter where you fall on the spectrum. You got to check your sources and double check your sources. Make sure you got more than one source, and then make sure you can track it all the way through. I think that's an important piece of the puzzle. We also need to make sure that we're watching for emotional language, things that are trying to appeal to your negative base emotions of anger, fear, frustration, contempt. Also be triply aware when the stirring of that emotional language also asks you to donate to something, to save the republic or to protect our democracy or to make sure the Constitution continues. Be careful. Watch for emotional language and watch for those who are profiting. Ask your question, why are they really sending me this email in the middle of this particular crisis or national disaster? Why are they sending this to me now? The fact that they are sending it to you at that very moment may cause you to question their motives. So emotional language and financial appeals. We also have to make sure that we're being careful of and watching out for the scapegoating. The extreme narratives often divide up the population by scapegoating or blaming one side or the other for whatever happened. That's a common thing. Now, we do get a lot of finger pointing, shoulder shrugging. What we really need in these kinds of moments is some shoulder squaring. And that goes top to bottom, left to right. All of us. Everyone's responsible for that. It's not somebody else's job. It's all of our jobs. And so we have to make sure we're being careful of those kinds of things as we consume the news, especially in those moments of disaster, of real national peril. Those are the things that we have to just slow down, and slowing down is the beginning of it. You've heard me say it often on this program, beware of instant certainty. And often we see it. And again, 24/7 news cycle, everyone wants to be first. Everyone's got a hot take. Everyone's going to deliver exactly what happened because they know. Instant certainty right now. And I'll say it again, instant certainty is the enemy of truth, and it undermines trust. And so be careful. Be careful of those who are so instantly certain that they know what happened, why it happened, who's responsible, and that they can lay it all out. So be careful of that. Be careful of your own bias. Be careful of the bias of your news source, and make sure you go to several sources and track it through. Be careful of that emotional language that stirs up those negative base emotions of anger, fear, frustration, contempt, and those donations they usually ask for following that. And to me, that's the real key to all of this, is to having a different kind of perspective in how we consume the news. And especially if you're younger and you're consuming most of your news off of your social media feed, you've got to be doubly vigilant to make sure that you're not just buying into somebody's conspiracy, somebody's misinformation because they're just getting it wrong, or disinformation because they're trying to lead you somewhere else. We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson.
Hercules Credit Union has been all about growing stronger together since 1946. They are in the community because they are about the community, and they're about relationships with those that they serve at Hercules Credit Union. Right now, you can go into Hercules Credit Union, open up a new account, and they'll put $150 into your new checking account when you get direct deposit. Great way to start things off for you. That doesn't happen very often, where you get an extra $150 dropped into your account just for signing up for direct deposit. Also, if you're looking at getting a home, get into your first home with Home Court Advantage Loan with as little as $3,500 now. Down, they have all kinds of competitive rates. You can also evaluate your retirement options if you're further down the economic path, and Hercules First Federal Credit Union will help you make sure you've got a strategy for your financial future. You can find Hercules Credit Union in Taylorsville, Harriman, or Riverton. As always with our friends at Hercules, you can just find them online at herculescu.com.
Wow. Biden's at it again.
Inflation, rising costs for everything. What now?
Try big government control of our Medicare drug benefit.
The more I hear, the more it seems we can't afford Biden's Medicare agenda.
They're right. And it's because seniors are already feeling the pain of Biden's drug coverage changes, with almost 2 million forced from their plans and spiked premiums for nearly 5 million more. Now, Congress wants to expand the Biden Medicare agenda even more. But studies show Biden's plan will restrict access, shrink coverage, and limit availability of needed drugs for all seniors. Thankfully, Congressman Blake Moore is a champion for Medicare drug coverage. Call him at 202-224-3121. Urge him to stop Biden's radical Medicare changes by opposing H.R. 4895 now. Paid for by Seniors for Better Care.
Is your summer heating up a little too much? Feeling the heat both literally and financially? The Blind Man can be your summer hero. Beat the heat and keep your wallet cool with stylish insulating shutters and cellular shades from The Blind Man. Enjoy a cooler home and lower energy bills with high-quality window coverings. And these benefits extend beyond summer. These same insulating properties can also help retain heat during the winter, contributing to year-round comfort and energy savings. The Blind Man's shutters and shades offer the perfect blend of enduring style and modern simplicity. They also provide an extra layer of protection against the sun, reducing heat gain, lowering your cooling costs. Plus, for peace of mind, their shutters and cordless shades are child-safe. Don't miss out creating your summer oasis. Visit theblindman.com today to schedule a free in-home consultation and find the perfect shades and shutters for your comfort needs. Theblindman.com.
From Ogden to St. George, Utah's premier window covering provider. The Blind Man.
Paid for by government. Did you hear? A secret hoard of 1904 $20 Gold Liberty coins have been found. These gorgeous 1904p gold coins are as bright and shiny as the day they were struck, and less than 500 of these gold coins are available. Coin experts are calling this secret U.S. gold coin discovery a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and you can own a piece of the hoard. When you call, you are guaranteed a 1904 Gold Liberty struck at the iconic Philadelphia Mint. With limited availability, you must call now. These 1904 dated gold coins are still in uncirculated condition with brilliant luster. That is 120 years of history you can hold in your hand. To learn more, call 1-800-895-7664. Call now and you'll receive a free bonus, a $75 value free with every order. Call 1-800-895-7664 now to secure your 1904p $20 Gold Liberty coins before they sell out. That's 1-800-895-7664.
Getting help with plumbing repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Donald Trump's first speech since the attempt on his life.
He essentially crumpled it up, tossed it away. His speech will now be focused more on unity.
Get full coverage before tomorrow's address, the Republican National Convention. Listen mornings and afternoons for the latest updates on KSL News Radio.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, local law enforcement in Butler County, Pennsylvania told the Secret Service they didn't have enough manpower, according to the Washington Post, to guard the building where a man fired shots at former President Trump. Second, a mother and son died in a house fire in Pleasant Grove early this morning. And third, a variety of grass that uses much less water than Kentucky bluegrass is now allowed in Utah. 99 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. Great to be with you today, as always. I am Boyd Matheson. From early in the 20th century, debates over opium regulations, the expansive reading of the Commerce Clause in modern times, we've seen all kinds of dramatic transformation in how government justifies its authority to address national concerns. And I know many of you did not wake up this morning thinking about Wickard v. Filburn, but maybe you should have. And we're going to actually talk to someone who actually did. Jacob Solom, the senior editor at Reason, nationally syndicated columnist, has a great piece by a very appropriate title, Congress Can Regulate Virtually Anything. And Jacob, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So I want to go back and have you give us a little history lesson. I actually want to start with Mr. Filburn and growing too much wheat and the Commerce Clause. Give us the baseline and then how we're seeing that still play out today.
Well, I guess I should preface this by saying that originally it was assumed that Congress could not do things like ban marijuana or ban particular kinds of guns. It couldn't do that outright. So initially what they did with the early laws is pretend that they were exercising the tax power.
Mm-hmm.
So the first major piece of federal gun control legislation in 1934 was part of the Revenue Code. And it was framed as a tax on machine guns, among other things. Basically, it imposed what then was a prohibitive tax on machine guns. It also targeted some other kinds of guns, but this is all ostensibly about collecting revenue. Same thing happened with early drug laws. If you look at the Harrison Narcotics Act, 1914, the Marijuana Tax Act, it's right there in the name, 1937. This is supposedly an exercise of the taxing power, again, because people assumed you couldn't just forthrightly ban things at the federal level, especially if you're talking about something that doesn't cross state lines. And then what happened is the Supreme Court, sometimes gradually, sometimes suddenly, reinterpreted the Interstate Commerce Clause to cover pretty much anything. So the case that you're talking about involved a farmer who violated federal law by growing more winter wheat than he was supposed to. And this entailed a fine that was not, even at the time, not a huge fine, but he refused to pay it as a matter of principle because he said any extra wheat that he grew beyond what he was allowed to grow was consumed on his farm. Either his family ate it or his livestock ate it. It never left the farm. It never entered commerce. He never sold it. So it's neither commercial nor interstate. The Supreme Court said that did not matter. Why? Because if this farmer does that and other farmers do that throughout the country, that means they will be buying less wheat on the market, and that ultimately affects interstate commerce. Congress at the time was trying to control prices for farm goods to try to assure a certain level of income. And if you produce too much, that brings prices down. Obviously, that's bad, not from the consumer's point of view, but from the farmer's point of view. And so that was the scheme they set up. And the Supreme Court said, given that that's their plan, they're trying to control supply and control price levels in the national economy. We can see that if people choose to grow their own and consume it, that will ultimately affect have a substantial impact on interstate commerce.
Yeah.
And that test became a license for, like you said at the beginning, Congress regulating virtually anything, because just think about tomatoes. If you grow your own tomatoes at home, that means you're not buying them in the supermarket, and those tomatoes might have been shipped from another state. And if a bunch of people do that, that obviously is going to have some kind of impact on interstate commerce. So by the same rationale, they could tell you either you may not grow tomatoes at all, the better to encourage income for farmers, or you can't grow more than a set amount, right? And this most recently, that kind of reasoning was applied in a marijuana case back in 2005. And the issue there was you had two people who sued the government who were patients in California. They used marijuana to treat their symptoms, which is legal under state law. One of them actually grew her own marijuana. Another had a couple of caregivers who grew it for her. But this was never bought or sold. It never crossed state lines. It never entered the market. And so they said Congress clearly has exceeded its power under the Interstate Commerce Clause because this is not commerce and it's not interstate. And now people who were following this and knew about the wheat case could have predicted they were going to fail because the reasoning in that case, which is back in 1942, was very broad. And the court had little trouble saying, okay, well, in this case, marijuana is something the government's trying to stamp out entirely, so it's not like wheat in that sense. People are still allowed to eat wheat. But it is like that in the sense that it has set up this comprehensive regulatory scheme, i.e. the Controlled Substances Act. And we can anticipate that if you let people grow marijuana, even for their own medical use, that some of that is going to get diverted into the market and maybe into the interstate market, and there you go. So that was the reasoning. And then the quote at the top of my article comes from a dissent by Clarence Thomas, where he said, if this is the logic we're going to follow, then Congress can regulate virtually anything. And we no longer have a federal government of limited and enumerated powers, right? Because the federal government only has the powers that the Constitution explicitly gives it, which is why, initially they were talking about the tax power. And then later on, when the Supreme Court gave them permission, they started talking about interstate commerce. You need to find some specific enumerated power that justifies any piece of legislation. But when the connection to interstate commerce can be that attenuated, you can see that it's a very broad license for legislation.
No question. Fascinating stuff. And this is one that, again, I know you didn't wake up thinking about this morning, but this has such big ramifications in so many different places and spaces in our lives that it has real impact. And I think this all really goes back to something we regularly point out on the show, and that is Congress just needs to do their dang job. And as long as we're having regulatory agencies or government officials doing this or that, or the Supreme Court or any court making those things, we rarely end up in the right space. And this is a great piece. You need to check this out at Reason.com. Jacob Sullum, senior editor at Reason. Again, the piece is called Congress Can Regulate Virtually Anything. Check that out at Reason.com today. Jacob, thanks so much for joining us today. Great insight.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
All right. That's Jacob Sullum, again, joining us. And amazingly, this is actually something we used to talk about a lot, of this farmer growing wheat in violation of federal law. He was growing more than he was supposed to. And then it became this big thing because they were all worried of what would happen if all the farmers did that. And so this whole idea of being able to regulate interstate commerce and be able to regulate everything, even things that didn't leave the state or didn't turn into commerce, then you end up with a government that is doing everything and in charge of everything. And that's often leads us to a really bad place in terms of the impact on citizens, and especially those who are buying services and substances. I think that's an important thing to take a look at there. All right, we're going to go ahead and step aside for some bottom of the hour news. Don't go anywhere. JD Tuchili is going to join us coming up next, talking about federalism. It's part of the problem that we need to solve. Federalism is part of the solution. We'll talk about that coming up next. We'll be right back.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. While many in the Democratic Party across the country are calling on President Joe Biden to quit the presidential race, the communications director for Utah's Democratic Party, Mason Hughes, says Biden is good for our state.
Under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, we've seen about $3.5 billion in federal investment come to Utah, investing in our infrastructure.
Hughes says getting financial help with airports, high-speed internet for rural areas, and roads makes Biden qualified to serve another term as president. A breed of drought-resistant grass that can play a role in water conservation is now legal in Utah. About 20 years of research found that hybrid Bermuda grass can last up to 6 weeks without water, much less noxious than its better-known cousin, common Bermuda grass. BYU professor Brian Hopkins has been testing it for years, and he helped to get the ban lifted. He says it could be a game changer for the state in conserving water.
We feel like conservatively it is 60% less water. I feel like it's probably more like 80% less water total.
And the ban on the hybrid Bermuda grass was lifted on Monday. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average up on the day now, 243 points. And at the close of trading, the NASDAQ was down 512 points. The S&P 500 was down 78. Just ahead, our weather will stay hot as far out as we can see right now. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:31.
Beat the heat this summer with a desert adventure in Beatty, Nevada. Beatty is so hot that it's cool. Discover the Old West and desert beauty, loaded with family value and adventure with anything from tours, hiking, biking, ATV trails, and great eateries, and the best stargazing in the West. Beatty is the most scenic entrance to Death Valley National Park and your entryway to true desert adventure. Explore the ghost town of Rhyolite or the world-famous Nut and Candy Company and Historic Museum. Beatty has hundreds of miles of trails for hikers, mountain bikers, and off-roading. And don't forget, Beatty Days, October 25th through the 27th. Beatty Days is an entire weekend of fun, complete with Old West shootouts, ICS chili cook-offs, 2K and 5K races, live music, bed races, desert art, a classic car show, a cornhole tournament, model railroads, vendors, food, and contests for everyone. Just 95 miles from Las Vegas. For info, visit BeattyNevada.org. Tell them you heard it on the radio and get a free gift at BeattyNevada.org.
Hey, have you saved more than $200,000 in an IRA or 401k? You may not realize it now, but you've got a big problem on your hands. And that problem is taxes. Because if you don't take advantage of some tax planning strategies now, Uncle Sam could take a big chunk of your hard-earned retirement savings. Learn how you could reduce the taxes on your IRA and 401k with a free retirement tax savings analysis. It's from Boss Retirement Solutions. If you've saved more than $200,000, schedule your free tax strategy session now by calling 801-896-9622. Discover the tax planning strategies that could dramatically reduce your taxes in retirement. Call 801-896-9622. That's 801-896-9622.
Advisory services offered through Boss Retirement Advisors, an SEC-registered investment advisory firm. Insurance products and services offered through Boss Retirement Solutions.
We have some exciting news to announce.
Master Electrical Service has joined Mountain Home Services.
And I can speak from experience, Deb. Mountain Home Services installed my furnace years ago, and it's been amazing.
And we know Master Electrical Service has been your trusted source for all your electrical needs, like your EV chargers, your generators, and recessed lighting.
But now that they've joined Mountain Home Services, they can help you with your HVAC, your heating and air, as well as your plumbing.
And it comes with that upfront pricing guarantee. I love the upfront pricing guarantee because it means no hidden fees.
100% satisfaction guarantee as well.
Master Electrical Service has been the name you trust since 1954.
They're the company we trust, and so can you.
Check them out now at mountainhomeutah.com.
That's mountainhomeutah.com, or give them a call at 801-543-2222. So easy to remember, 801-543-2222.
When Dee and I built our new home, and it's almost been 10 years now,
I think of all of the appliances that we put in that house, and I cannot tell you how many of them already we have had some major repairs and even replacements. You know the one thing that I haven't given a second thought to? It's the Connecticut soft water system. It is remarkable. We've had 2 systems in 2 different homes, and not once have we ever called with an issue to my friends at Connecticut. It's time for you to call Connecticut. If you're replacing an old system or if you're building a new home, whatever it might be, you will be amazed at how efficient the Connecticut soft water system is. For example, when your neighbor puts in 3 bags of salt in his or her system, you will be putting in only 1. It's remarkable how efficient it is. Give them a call. Great people to do business with. Call Northern Utah's authorized Connecticut dealer at 801-576-8600 or go to softwaterutah.com.
Here's a way to get breaking news updates anywhere you go.
At the store or in a work meeting, you can get breaking news on your phone.
You can quickly read it, swipe, or click for more. It's super discreet, super fast.
That's the app for KSL News Radio.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Meese.
We have a couple of crashes on southbound I-15 in the Draper-Bluffdale area. One just after Bangerter Highway. It is out of traffic over to the left shoulder. And then another one just past 146 South, also out of traffic on the shoulder. Watch for a stalled vehicle on the ramp from westbound I-80 to go southbound on I-215's East Belt. Fill up your bucket list in Box Elder County. History, recreation, and wildlife, and excellent dining and shopping await you. Learn more at visitboxeldercounty.com. Sponsored by the Utah Office of Tourism. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
We'll have highs close to or over 100 degrees going into next week. There's a chance for thunderstorms over the mountains that could spill into the valleys of the Wasatch Front. Right now, we're at 99 degrees with sunshine. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
There we go. In this era of escalating political polarization, increasing tension between different political ideologies, the solution may be found in an interesting place. A simple concept of decentralizing power. The approach that, of course, is rooted in one of our favorite principles, federalism, suggests that by shifting more of that authority from the federal government down to the state and the local level, we could reduce a lot of the intensity of the national political conflicts. As we always say, that if you want to make federal elections and big government things less consequential to your life, if we have less of it in our lives, that's where it actually begins. But it starts by decentralizing that power. J.D. Tuchili, of course, a great friend of the show and someone we always look to help us navigate where we are as a nation and where we need to go. Former managing editor at Reason.com, current contributing editor, has a great piece on federalism, and that federalism could be the secret sauce to heal a divided nation. And J.D., welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me on.
All right, so let's unpack this a little bit. We often say that federalism solves a whole host of problems. Describe how federalism, this idea of getting power away from the federal government back to the states and the local governments, could be a healing component in a divided nation.
Well, I mean, I started from the very obvious fact that we've got a problem with extreme political tension in this country. We saw the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump on Saturday, and that comes kind of as a culmination, although I expect it to keep continuing, of rising political violence, which we've seen for several years now. There have been attacks on politicians. There have been rioting. There's been a lot of trouble, and polling of the American people themselves finds that the political factions don't view each other as simply opponents with different ideas across the aisle. They actually hate each other. They loathe each other to the point of even contemplating being violent against each other. And, the fact that actually could burst into reality, we saw on Saturday at Trump's rally. Now, the reason I would look at federalism is this country was founded on the idea that diverse peoples, people with different religions, different viewpoints, different preferences for life, and that's very much who had settled the different colonies that then became the 13 original American states, ought not necessarily be subject to the same top-down rules. They may well have different ways of life that require different laws and different approaches, different programs. So that should be honored. And the genius of the founders was a federal system with a central government, the federal government, that has responsibility for national defense and interstate commerce and just some basic responsibilities, with most things decided at the state level and the local level. We've obviously drifted far away from that to the point now where our national elections are huge and contentious and endless. And people get very, very angry at each other. So how do you diffuse that? Well, one thing we could do is to make the national elections less important. If they're less important, there's less reason to fight over them. And the best way to make them less important is for the federal government to have less responsibility. Take a lot of that responsibility it's accrued since the founding, return it to something approaching its original role, and send that power back to the states and localities as close down to the individual as you possibly can, so that rules are not imposed on people over their objections. At least we minimize the chance of that. There's more likelihood that people will be able to choose places where they can live that have laws and taxes and programs that are somewhat to their liking. And if they're not, well, it's a lot easier to cross a county line or a state line than it is to emigrate from the United States or be accepted to another country someplace else. Yeah. So that's why I think that federalism, which is a major component of the American experiment, holds the key to resolving some of the horrendous national tensions that we've seen culminating in the attack on Trump over the weekend.
Yeah, and there's no question that the founders understood that it was the idea of getting it away from that centralized power that they did in the Constitution, have very limited things that the federal government was supposed to do. As you mentioned, things like interstate commerce, foreign affair kinds of things in terms of treaties, immigration, some of those very basic things. But it's become so much, as you say, it's all or nothing, because it used to be that everything was local when it came to politics. Now everything is national, and it's also harder. And I think this is one of these subtle things underneath the headline, and that is, not only is there more accountability at that local level, there's less of the us-them at the local level, because you actually know the person who's your mayor or your city council person who's on your school board. And so you're more likely to actually run into them at the grocery store or have a conversation with them at a Little League soccer game. And that also serves to tamp down some of that hype and hyperbole that leads to a lot of contempt.
Oh, it absolutely does. I mean, it's not that local politics can't be contentious. They absolutely can be. I mean, I remember during the pandemic, there were protests outside I live in a county with the next town over, outside the mayor's house, because of policies he chose. But they knew him. They saw him in local restaurants. They yelled at him, but they yelled at a guy they knew and could see. And he ended up backing down. And the city council over there, stripped him of some of the authority. And the thing was, you could always, if you wanted to escape whatever rule you thought was a good idea and you thought was a bad idea, you could cross the city line, go out in the county or go to the next town, and it was different. Local politics at least are closer to people who live more or less alike and are more likely to have similar ideas about what the good life looks like. There's no particular reason why a small town in Arizona should be subject to the same laws and taxes and programs as, say, New York City or Los Angeles, and vice versa. That doesn't make any sense unless you're somebody who's enamored of the idea of centralizing all power and imposing top-down solutions, so-called solutions. Because as we've seen, that approach has led us to the point where the country is bitterly divided, where people say that they despise each other. I cited one, a poll last year from the Center for Politics at the University of Virginia, where they said roughly half of both Biden and Trump voters view those who support the other party as threats to the American way of life. And they're so committed to the idea that they're willing to consider 40% of both, the idea of using violence to prevent the other side from coming to power. I mean, that's nuts that we've reached this point in our history. Yeah. And if we can just if we can diffuse some of those tensions by localizing decision making, I think that we might take a step away from the point we're at.
Yeah, give us real quick just maybe some thoughts or ideas of where are some of those natural places where you could start shifting that national top-down solution back into kind of that federalism model and getting it back to the state and local governments?
Well, I cited some ideas that are actually already in the Republican Party platform, where they talked about stripping the federal government of a responsibility and authority over education and sending it back to the states. I think that's a great idea. Why should that be at the federal level? The Republican Party has also moderated its stance on abortion and said that the states ought to be making that decision. J.D. Vance, actually made the same point that I said when he said that Ohio would probably choose a different policy than California and would choose a different policy than Alabama. Of course they would, and that's the way it should be. We might even want to move it more local, since our counties now are probably as populous as the states were at the founding. But, right. I mean, the idea is there. The better, more decentralized it gets, the better. And then, once again, if you don't like what rule gets imposed where you live, it's a lot easier to leave a locality or even a state than it is to have to flee the whole country. Yeah. So those are areas that we can start. Certainly with things like education, abortion policy, maybe gun policy, healthcare, whatever it might be. There's a lot of things the federal government ought not be doing that it is doing.
Yeah, great perspective as always, J.D. Chile. Contributing editor at Reason. You can check out his piece, Federalism Could Heal a Divided Nation, at Reason.com today. JD, as always, thanks so much for your perspective.
Thank you for having me on.
If we want to have the federal government less consequential, if we want federal elections to be less consequential in our lives, if we get the power away from Washington, D.C. and back to the state and local level, that tones everything down. It totally shifts the focus, and the conversations will be vastly different. One more area where federalism contains a lot of the solutions we need to heal the nation. All right, we'll step aside for one last break. We'll come back with some final thoughts on Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. Stick around. We'll be right back.
When you're getting a new roof installed, you don't want to wonder, when are they going to be done? Or even worse, what are they doing up there? You'll never have to ask when you hire IWC Roofing, because their team of certified installers will be texting you pictures from the roof. You're going to know exactly what's going on and what you're getting for your money. And on most homes, they'll do the entire job in one day. In, out, cleaned up, and they'll even power wash your driveway just to say thank you. Now, you think you'd pay a premium for this level of service, but IWC does so many roofs, they get the material for less, and they pass the savings on to you. IWC is an Owens Corning certified platinum contractor. Of course, financing is available. Even better, their summer special, up to $2,000 off your quote. But you have to make the call. $2,000 off right now. Call IWC Roofing, 801-232-5690. That's 801-232-5690. Or go to IWCRoofingUtah.com.
Want to keep your gas-powered engines running like new? Stable's proprietary formulas are proven by third-party testing to outperform the competition in keeping fuel fresh, preventing corrosion, and cleaning the entire fuel system. With Stable, you can have confidence you are doing the right thing for your engine's long-term health. Just pour into your gas can or fuel tank, then top off with fresh fuel. At every fill-up or when you store, start with Stable. Available where fuel additives are sold.
Get in zone, AutoZone.
Welcome to AutoZone. What are you working on today?
I think my battery's dead.
With free battery testing and charging, we can help you get back on the road.
Get in zone, AutoZone.
So what if I need a new one?
We have the right Duralast battery for you, only at AutoZone.
Get in zone, AutoZone.
And what about my old battery?
We can recycle it right here at America's #1 battery destination.
Get in zone, AutoZone.
Restrictions apply.
At JCW's, we think tipping might be getting a little out of hand. Like when you're asked to tip at the register before you've even been served, or when you're at the yogurt shop and find yourself serving yourself. And don't even get us started on frosted tips making a comeback. That's why at JCW's, when you pay for a third-pound ranch bacon cheeseburger, that's what you pay. And no one at the register is going to stare longingly at you while you awkwardly maneuver through the tip screen for food you don't even have yet. Honestly, we're just happy to see you at any of our 5 locations in Provo, South Jordan, Lehigh, Harriman, and American Fork. So come on in and enjoy some quality time and great food with family and friends. And we promise, we won't be pushing you for a tip.
Hey, this is Chris with JCW's, and we just want to say thank you, and especially to our loyal customers. We want you to know that at JCW's, your business is all the tip we need. JCW's, quality and a lot of it.
Common Spirit Health, hospitals, clinics, and caregivers, all connected to advance healthcare in Colorado, Kansas, and Utah. Healthcare with human kindness is here. Hello, human kindness.
Troy, how is it possible that we're already past the summer solstice?
And how is it possible that Bish's is already celebrating our first full year in American Fork right now?
So, what are we going to do to make the most out of the rest of summer and celebrate our first anniversary?
Oh, buddy, buckle all the way up for the biggest Bish's RV block party you've ever experienced.
Let's make the rest of summer the best of summer with the lowest pricing of the season on all new and used RVs.
With payments as low as $179 per month on approved credit, 0 down, and an unheard of 5-year extended warranty.
Plus, purchase any RV during the sale and receive free propane refills for life for as long as you own the RV.
And July 19th and 20th, get free lunch from 11 to 2 and let the family play all day long with activities for the kids. Go to Bish's.com/summerblock party for more details.
Kickstart the rest of your summer at the Bish's RV Summer Block Party, July 15th through the 20th.
Only at Bish's RV of American Fork, where memories begin.
OIC based on 0% down, 7.9% APR for 180 months. Stock number L75171, subject to prior sale. Deal number 822B. See dealer for details.
We have some exciting news to announce.
Master Electrical Service has joined Mountain Home Services.
And I can speak from experience, Deb. Mountain Home Services installed my furnace years ago, and it's been amazing.
And we know Master Electrical Service has been your trusted source for all your electrical needs, like your EV chargers, your generators, and recessed lighting.
But now that they've joined Mountain Home Services, they can help you with your HVAC, your heating and air, as well as your plumbing.
And it comes with that upfront pricing guarantee. I love the upfront pricing guarantee because it means no hidden fees.
100% satisfaction guarantee as well.
Master Electrical Service has been the name you trust since 1954.
They're the company we trust, and so can you.
Check them out now at mountainhomeutah.com.
That's mountainhomeutah.com, or give them a call at 801-543-2222. So easy to remember, 801-543-2222.
911, what's your emergency? Someone on the other line said they kidnapped my son.
On September 12, 1995, McKay Everett disappeared from his home in Conroe, Texas.
There was no sign of forced entry. It was just as if McKay had walked out of his own free will.
And to this day, McKay's mother, Paulette, feels that justice was never truly served. Ransom is available now. Listen at ransompodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, Democratic Party officials in Utah are standing by their man. They are not urging President Biden to quit the ticket. Second, Bermuda grass has been illegal in Utah because it's invasive, but there's a new variety that uses 6 times less water than regular lawn grass. And third, Utah's governor headed to Paris for the Olympic announcement and the Summer Games. 99 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. Great to be with you today. As always, I am Boyd Matheson. As we round out the program today, if you missed any of the segments, you're going to want to go back to kslpodcast.com and just go to Inside Sources. You can listen to any of the individual segments, any of our guests. You can go right to those. Great way to consume the show. Great way to go back and review. I find myself often doing that with some of our extraordinary guests as they share so much insight. It's so rich. I can't always take notes fast enough while I'm doing the interview and learning. So you can go back and re-listen and get that perspective and get those things down. And our program today, we kicked off today with something that is just disturbing to me today. It's frustrating to me today. And that is after an attempted assassination on Saturday, a little after 6 p.m. Eastern Time, And all the calls over the weekend from people across the political spectrum to cool down, lower the temperature, dial it back, that neither side could hold their ground or hold their fire for 4 days. Didn't even make it 4 days. Didn't even make it 3, technically. So a little over 72 hours, and both sides were back at it. Pejorative-laced rants, calling each other out. When you can't even say your opponent's name without 2 or 3 pejoratives in front of it or behind it, something's wrong and something's deeply broken. And so we talked about that to start the show today. We talked about the rhetoric from yesterday. Again, 72 hours after an attempted assassination on a former president and the current nominee for the Republican Party for the highest office in the land. You had both sides going at it. And the Republicans did it last night. A number of them gave speeches that were shouting, that were angry, that were fear-based, that were all about contempt for the other side and how awful and evil and horrible they were. And the President of the United States did the same thing yesterday in Las Vegas, just to the west of us. Just couldn't say extreme MAGA Republican Trump on and on and on. And the angry, frustrated, shouting kind of voices that we just don't need. Now, we talked to J.D. Tuchili in the last segment about how do we actually do this for more than a moment. And to me, that's the real test for all of us. Can we do this for more than a moment? We're pretty good at moments in this country, but we're pretty horrible at sustained movements. And so many people over the weekend said, oh, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the moment the fever breaks and we all get on board and we have a different kind of conversation. And we did it for a couple of days. And now we're back to square one. So of all the speeches that we've heard across the political spectrum today and last night, from Democrats and Republicans, liberals and conservatives, there were very few speeches, very few comments made that were positive, that could apply to Democrats and Republicans equally. But I want to go back to one that we played at the start of the show that I think is one that could be played as it was live at the Republican National Convention last night, but could also be a theme and a speech delivered at the Democratic National Convention that will happen next month. And it actually came from Florida Senator Marco Rubio. Now, whether you like Marco Rubio's politics or not, that's not the question. I just want you to listen to how he framed what we ought to be doing and how we ought to be doing it in order to produce the result that we all ought to be hoping for. Take a listen.
Now, we must stand up and we must fight. Fight not with violence or destruction, but with our voices and our votes. Fight not against each other, but for the hopes and dreams we share in common and make us one. It is time to put our country and our people first again. And if we do, we will not just make America great again. We will make America greater than it has ever been.
Now, if that's what you want to be part of, if you want to make this country better than it's ever been, because that really should be the goal for all of us, right? Whether you're doing that in your own family, in your own community, at your own place of work, or where you're doing it in politics. The goal should always be to leave a legacy that you're going to leave it better than you found it. But the trajectory we're on right now, not only are we not going to leave this place better than it's ever been, we may put it in a more precarious space than it's ever been. Less safe, less productive, less united. So I think Marco Rubio got that right. That the way we do this is not with violence, but with our voices and with our votes. That we do it not so we can fight against each other for political power, but we can do it with an eye toward the future and the kind of country that we want to leave to the next generation. Idea of contempt. That someone you disagree with, someone who lives different, looks different,